From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
All right, good morning, and on behalf of the Library of Congress, welcome to the 2010 National Book Festival. We hope you have a wonderful day celebrating books and reading and the joy of reading right here on the National Mall. Before we begin, I want to inform you that the pavilion's presentations today are being filmed for the Library of Congress website and for their archives. So please be mindful of this. If you have any problems, you don't have to stay, but we hope you do because this is going to be a wonderful presentation. And please do not sit on the camera risers that are located in the back of the pavilion. Thank you very much. Well, once again, it's nice to see you all. My name is Un Yang, and if you are up early getting ready for work or getting your kids ready for school, or just have insomnia, I deliver the news in the morning if you turn on NBC4. So good morning to you. And I love books, and I was an avid reader until I had kids. And now it's a fond memory. I still try to read once in a while. My youngest is with me. I apologize for that. But the boys are in soccer. You know, you got to do the tag team action. But thank you for your understanding. Since this is the Teens and Children Pavilion, I figure you parents understand my work life. Thank you very much. And I love this day because this is a day when authors are rock stars, and they should be treated as such because they fill our imaginations and take us away from our current life and help us to explore our imaginations and other worlds in so many great ways. Well, our first author this morning serves up exciting and suspenseful thrillers that take readers behind the scenes of American politics. Brad Meltzer wrote the #1 New York Times bestselling book, The Book of Fate, as well as the bestsellers The 10th Justice, Dead End, The First Counsel, and The Book of Lies. He is the author of the critically acclaimed comic book, Justice League of America. Woohoo! It won the Eisner Award. And he is also the co-creator of the TV show Jack and Bobby. Obviously very impressive. So why is he here today in the Teens and Children's Pavilion, you ask? Well, you can thank his 8-year-old son. When his son was born, Brad wanted to write him a book that would last a lifetime. But as he started writing, he realized he didn't know enough about fatherhood to teach his son the life lessons he wanted to share. So he went on a mission to write about real-life heroes who've shown strength, courage, perseverance, and kindness, and the belief that anything is possible. And then tell their stories in hopes they will guide his son to become a good man and perhaps change the world himself. That labor of love resulted in Brad's first nonfiction book, a hand-picked collection of the best stories of heroism from the Wright brothers, Nelson Mandela, Jim Henson, Harper Lee, Rosa Parks, and many, many more. Heroes for My Son is a gift to his child and to his readers. Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Meltzer.
My name is Suzanne Collins. Come on, when you come to speak and everyone in the front row is holding her book instead of mine, like I'm not going to make that joke. So here's the story, right? I didn't know anything about being a parent. I thought I did, right? Every parent in this audience knows when that kid comes, you think you know what you're going to do, but you don't know what you're going to do. I learned, however, from the greatest parents of all time. Because my mother, when I went to Borders headquarters in Ann Arbor, Michigan, they said, guess where your books sell more than anywhere else? And I said, well, obviously, New York City, 8 million New Yorkers in one place. And nope. I said, Washington, D.C., I always write about Washington. No. The #1 place where my book sold was the Boca Raton, Florida Borders, 1 mile from the furniture store where my mother used to work. That means my mother single-handedly beat 8 million New Yorkers. And so that's my mom's side. My dad, this is true, my dad in December had heart surgery, open heart surgery, major surgery for him. And when you go for open heart surgery, the difference is you got to go interview the doctors. And you go and interview the doctors. You don't just say, hey, have it to me. You got to make sure you like the guy. You know what kind of, they're going to do to you. So we go see the first doctor, and he says, and he's really finely dressed, and his manicured hands, and he just looks all put together, and he says, I don't do the full cut open your chest. I do a small incision up here. It's going to be completely harmless. I'm going to go in. I'm not even going to crack your rib cage. You're going to be done in no time. You're going to be out of the hospital in a day. We know he's lying to us, but he's really put it together. And he's like, it's a new procedure. No one can do it. It's amazing. It's fantastic. You're going to love it. Then we go see another doctor. And he says, I do it the old-fashioned way. I crack your chest open. I have to pull you apart. It's going to be a brutal recovery. You could die. Okay? And he says, as he's saying this, he looks down at the chart and he goes, oh, wait, Meltzer. Oh, Brad Meltzer, I'm in there with him. He goes, I read your books. I say, thanks. And he goes on. He says, it's really going to be a ruthless ordeal for you. And so we leave, and I look at my dad, and it's pretty clear which doctor we have to pick, right? The first doctor's all put together, and he's never lost anyone on the table, he told us. And my dad says, well, we found our man. And I said, which one? He says, the second guy. And I said, Dad, what are you talking about? It's going to be harder, and you could die, and they crack your rib cage, and you're never going to get out of there. And he says, yeah, but he buys the books. And I said, find out if it's hardback or paperback. But the truth was, my dad actually did go with the first doctor. I had to convince him. That is a true story. I can't make it up. And so with those parents, I embarked on parenthood myself. And as you heard in the introduction, 8 years ago at Sibley Hospital here in Washington, D.C., my son was born. And I came home. I love telling this story here because this is the hometown crowd, right? I lived here for so long. I have my kids here, and I thank you all for coming here. This is obviously a very personal place for me to be. And I'm driving home from Sibley, stuck at that red light off that wonderful circle that wraps you around, and you have to go around twice because you missed the turn, hypothetically. And as I'm at that red light, I remember looking up at the sky at night and saying, what kind of man do I want my son to be? And it's a big moment, right? It's that moment when everything in the world is possible. That moment when you can dream your child to be anything you want. I'm not talking about famous or wealthy, but to be a nice person, to be kind, to be the person who's nice to everybody and everybody likes. And I came home that night, and I said, I'm going to write a book that lasts his whole life. And the truth was, I knew nothing about fatherhood, nothing at all. I started writing rules for him to live by. I said, be nice to the fat kid in class. And I started writing all these rules one by one that he was, one day I'd give him this book, and he'd think I was indeed the greatest father. And then a friend of mine told me this amazing story about the Wright brothers. Is that every time the Wright brothers went out to fly their plane, they would bring enough materials for multiple crashes. That means every time they went out, they knew they were going to fail. And they would crash and rebuild and crash and rebuild, and that's why they took off. And I said, I love that story. I want my son to hear that story. I want my daughter to hear that story. I want them to know that if they have perseverance and they work hard and they have a plan and they have a good side order of stubbornness, that they can do anything in this world. And I said, that's the book I want to write. Not a book of rules, but a book of heroes. And I said, I don't want to just write, the obvious story. We all know the obvious story about everyone. What I wanted to find was not just stories about famous people, but I wanted to find moments we didn't know. So Thomas Jefferson is in the book, but not because he wrote the Declaration of Independence. He's in the book because he never took credit for writing the Declaration while he was alive. He never stood up and said, hey, that Declaration you all know and love? That was me. I wrote it. TJ. I totally made that part up, by the way. I write fiction. He didn't call himself TJ. That's not historically accurate. But I will tell you that I love that story also, right? And I love that story because I want my son to learn that kind of humility. Imagine a politician today having that kind of humility. A politician today would tattoo the words, I wrote the Declaration of Independence on their forehead, right? That's what they would do if they did something like that. And I said, those are the stories I need to find. Not stories of just famous people, but stories of what we're all capable of on our very best days. And so there are stories in there of people you don't know. There's a guy named Frank Shankwitz, who's a police officer. And Frank Shankwitz found out about a boy with leukemia who also wanted to be a police officer. So Shankwitz had a police uniform made for the boy. He had a little motorcycle riding course made for the boy. And then the boy went into a coma. So Officer Shankwitz goes to the boy's hospital room, and he pins on little motorcycle wings on the boy, at which point the boy wakes up out of his coma and smiles. And then he falls back into the coma. The boy eventually dies. And on the way home from the funeral, Officer Frank Shankwitz, this police officer, looks at his buddy on the plane and says, we made that kid really happy for just one day, we should do that for other kids. And that's how the Make-A-Wish Foundation is born, right? I didn't know that story. I love that story too. I want my son to hear that story. I want my daughter to hear that story. And these are the things that we're all capable of. It's just the idea of what you can do with one idea when you share it with somebody else. So the book is set up very simply. It's one-page story on the right-hand page, one picture on the left, and it has Jim Henson and Mr. Rogers, Rosa Parks, and Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I will tell you, one of my favorite moments was when I got to share, and I couldn't tell this at the beginning of the book tour, but I could tell it now because I got to share the book with my son. Right? This is the moment. It's called Heroes for My Son, and I'm giving it to my son. This is the moment when the clouds are going to part. The rainbows will come from every direction. This is going to be it. I've waited nearly a decade for this exact moment. And so I go into his bedroom. I wait till my other kids are asleep, and we get on the bed, and he doesn't care about Rosa Parks. He doesn't care about Eleanor Roosevelt. He wants to know where the athletes are. He likes sports. So he flips through the book really quickly, and he finds a guy named Roberto Clemente. And Roberto Clemente is a guy who used to play one of the famous baseball players for the Pittsburgh Pirates, okay? And I always tell my son all the time, like, just because you're a famous athlete doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make you a hero at all. It just means you're good at sports. Being a novelist who gets on the bestseller list doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make you anyone. It just means you can write. And it just means your family buys a lot of copies, right? Trust me on this one. Trust me. And so I'm reading Roberto Clemente. He's in the book not because he was a great baseball player, not because of the Gold Glove awards he won. He's in it because he found out about an earthquake in Nicaragua. And Roberto Clemente wanted to get so involved, he sent 3 plane loads of food and medicine to Nicaragua. All 3 plane loads were stolen. They were confiscated. And so he's so determined to make sure that the 4th plane gets there, he says, I'm going to get on the plane myself and make sure it gets there. And he gets on the plane, and the plane crashes in the ocean, killing everyone on board, including Roberto Clemente. And as it says in the book, he's not a hero because he died. He's a hero because of why he got on board. And so now I'm sharing this, waiting for my son to tell me how inspired he is, what a genius I am to produce this book for him. And he looks at me. I feel him shrinking in my arms. I can tell something's wrong. And he looks up at me and he says, Dad, this is sad. And now I'm terrified that I've ruined everything, right? I blew it. The book is not working the way I wanted. This is a disaster. It's backfired right in my face. And so the next night, I put the book aside. I put it on the side table. I don't even bring it out. And he races into the room, and he jumps up on the bed, and he says to me, so who are we going to read tonight? And I said, well, what about Roberto Clemente? And he says, I like him. And I said, why? And he eventually says to me, because he gave his life to save those people. And I think we all know, for those of us who are parents, that sometimes the greatest moments in parenthood are the moments that are complete and utter accidents. And that's how it was for me in that moment. Everything worked out exactly how I wanted, but in the way I never anticipated. And it was this great, beautiful reward. And the idea that that story of generosity and perseverance and kindness to strangers and charity is twisted into my son's chest is the greatest thing to me in the whole world. That's better than being on any bestseller list, except the hardcover bestseller list. And so what I tell you about is, I want to tell you about the most important hero in the book. And the most important hero in the book is my mother. All due respect to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, my mom is in the last pages of the book. And I'll tell you, my mom died 2 years ago from breast cancer. And it was the reason that I really decided to finish the book. I said, you know what, I'm not saving the kind words for the eulogy anymore. I'm not going to wait his whole life to give it to him. I started really thinking I got to finish it. And a couple years ago, when I was living here in Washington, and my second book came out, my publisher actually shut down. It was sold, and I didn't know if anyone was going to take over my contract. I was terrified because this was the end of my writing career. And I called my mom, and I said to her, you know, how scared I was. And my mom said to me, I'll never forget, she said, I'd love you if you were a garbage man. And she wasn't taking a crack at garbage man. My uncle was a garbage man. She was just saying, no, I don't care what you are. I don't care what your job is. I love you no matter what. And every day, to this day that I sit down to write, I say those words to myself. I'd love you if you were a garbage man. Just soaking in my mom's love for me. It's what I do every morning when I get up. Right before I sit down at that writing table. That's my one ritual. And I will tell you that that's why she's my hero. But for you, the most important hero in Heroes for My Son is on the very last page, because the very last page is blank. And it says your hero's photo here and your hero's story here. And I promise you that if you take a picture of your mom or your dad or your kids or your grandparents or a military member of your family or a teacher in your life, and you put their picture in this book, and you write one sentence about what they've done for you, that will be the most beautiful written page in Heroes for My Son, the most vital page. And I think that's what the book is about, is giving my son a way to say thank you. Thank you for being my hero. Give everyone a chance. It's what, we are a country, I think we all recognize, we are starving for heroes. Look around. It is tough times out there. And it is tough to find a hero. And that's what's vital to me, is finding that hero. So this is my chance to kind of bring it out. What I'd love to do, more important, is take questions, because I always find that's the best way, rather than have me lecture for a half hour. So ask any questions you want. I write fiction. I'll make up an answer. It's fine. Yes, ma'am.
I am so inspired by you when you mentioned Clemente, because I am from Puerto Rico and I have known Roberto all my life. So thank you for making Roberto part of your book.
Thank you. The question is, you are awesome for mentioning Roberto Clemente. That is the best question I've ever had. Any more questions that say things like, I am the best, I am the greatest, I am wonderful, I will take those first. Those are my favorite questions. Thank you, ma'am. Yes? Yeah, the question was, in doing the research, what was the most inspiring story? There was one, beside my mom and my grandfather who are in the book, there was one that blew me away. And it was Anne Sullivan. And I had Helen Keller was actually picked out for the book. She was the one who was supposed to be in the book. And then I found out, everyone knows the story of Helen Keller, that she's this woman who's blind and deaf and supposedly dumb. And everyone says, forget this girl. She's unteachable. Give up on her. And her teacher, Anne Sullivan, we all know the story. Many people have seen the movie, and she writes in her hand every day, and that's how she learns to talk and how she learns so much. What I didn't know at the time is that Helen Keller actually applied to college, and the dean of Radcliffe College at the time said, you shouldn't come. It's going to be too hard for you. And she listened for a year, and Helen Keller for a year didn't go to college. But then she said, I'm going to try. What I didn't also know at the time is that there was no Braille books. There were no Braille books for her to read. So the only way she could read her textbooks was that her teacher, Anne Sullivan, would every day finger write in her hands every book, 5 hours every day, just finger writing in her hand what everything said in the book. At the same time, Anne Sullivan's own eyesight was fading. And her doctor said to her, if you keep reading to this girl, you are going to risk going blind yourself. And Anne Sullivan said, I don't care. And she kept reading to Helen Keller. And Helen Keller graduated from Radcliffe cum laude. And as someone who had a teacher change my life, I read that story. I mean, that was gasoline for me for months. I still, when I get down and I'm thinking, oh, it's really hard, I read that story and it's just fantastic to me. I love that someone like that exists on this planet with us. Yes. Yeah, the question is, why do you hate your daughter? So the question is, what about heroes? Do I have heroes for my daughter? Yes, I am not that stupid. I made one deal when I signed the deal for this book. I said, there has to be a 2-book deal. And they said, why? I said, you clearly have never met my daughter. Now, my daughter, for those of you who have met her, because there are a few I see here, she comes into my office every day and says, where's my book, Dad? When are you going to be done with my book? She drives me harder than my own editor. I always knew I was going to do a book for her as well. I certainly saved people for her. I saved Anne Frank for her. I saved certain people that I knew had to be in her book. And it's amazing to work on because it's the same, and I treat them the same, but it's different, as anyone who has a son and a daughter knows. It just is. And I know that my daughter's life, no matter how idealistic I want to be about this world, is going to be different than my son's in an experience. And so the lessons I'm picking, I thought they would be no difference at all, and I wanted to say, nope, I treat them exactly the same. I bought wood blocks for my kid. I didn't buy Barbies. I didn't buy cars. My son, of course, loves cars, and my daughter loves Barbies. You can't control some things, and I can't control the fact that I'm picking different heroes for her in a strange way, and many of the same heroes. The other question in terms of what else working on, there is a new thriller coming out in January called The Inner Circle that takes place here in Washington, D.C. It's at the National Archives. It is the beginning of a series character for me, the first series I've ever done, and I can't wait for it to come out. I can't wait to share it. It's the first book in 4 years I've done back in Washington. Everyone knows that has come and seen me speak here before, I always steal the physical descriptions of characters from when I ride the metro here. And so if you see yourself in the book, it is because I stole your face. That is absolutely true. And then the other thing we're working on, if you look in either November or December, it'll be on the air, and you can check on our Facebook page. If you go to our Facebook page, we're launching a TV show on the History Channel, and it is called Brad Meltzer's Decoded. That is the greatest title of all time to me. And as I told my wife the other day, you know, honey, what are we having for Brad Meltzer's dinner tonight? Because yesterday we had Brad Meltzer's chicken, and tonight I'd like to have Brad Meltzer's pasta. But what the show is it lets me take all the things I do in my thrillers and try and find the real answers in real life. So one of the episodes in 1792, when the first piece of the White House was put down, the very first cornerstone was put down, within 24 hours it supposedly disappeared. For 200 years now, nobody has been able to find it. No one knows where the first piece of the White House is. And Harry Truman went looking for it when he redid the White House. And Barbara Bush went looking for it when they celebrated the anniversary celebration. Nobody knows where it is. And that's an episode of Decoded that we're going to try and find the answer. So that's basically what's going to be working on from there, is those three things. Yes, sir?
Yes, I don't have a question. I have an inspiration.
Yes, please.
You told my wife and wrote in her book, no is not an option. And she finished her book, and I want to give it to you.
That's awesome. Yes, please. Let me tell you something. Every time I speak, when they ask where you got started, I tell one story. And I didn't tell it here because I figured, you know what, I want to tell something new and not do the same thing. But every time, when I wrote my first book, 24 rejection letters. Now, there were, to be clear, only 20 publishers at the time, and I got 24 rejection letters. That means some people are writing you twice to make sure you get the points. And I remember I was on the phone here in D.C. when I got my 23rd and 24th rejection letter. My agent called me up and said, sorry, kiddo. I'll never forget it. I was looking at the fire station across from the Ritz-Carlton downtown on M Street, and every time I passed it, I actually have a picture on my phone of it. And whenever I think I'm getting too big, or I think I'm thinking I'm too much of a hotshot, I look at that picture and remember what it's like to have nothing but rejections. And every time I tell that story, someone comes up to me afterwards and says, I'm working on a book and that means something to you. But never in over a decade has anyone come and given me a book after they heard that talk. So thank you. I appreciate that. And congratulations. That's a big deal. So every single person here who's working on a book, please, please, please don't let anyone tell you no. That is a vital, vital lesson. Other questions that tell me how awesome I am? Yes? Yeah, the question is, are there any current heroes, or did you just pick the dead ones? And you know what? There are, and I think that's what I love most about this book, is that there are heroes everywhere. There's a guy named Andy Mayeras from Florida, who's a Special Olympics swimmer. And when he was born, they said he wasn't going to walk for a couple years. And he wound up doing it much faster. By 9 months, he wound up moving and being able to crawl. They thought it was going to take him years to do it. And they didn't think he could learn, and his parents put him in the pool, and he learned how to count by swimming laps. He loved to swim, and he would count 1, 2, 3, 4. And even in the Special Olympics, he's considered an underdog. He's basically has the hands of literally like a 5-year-old. He has these tiny little hands. He's small. He's petite. Even in the Special Olympics, think of that for a moment, he's considered the underdog. But he has something like 6 world records. I love that. And he lives in Florida, not far from me. I love that that guy is there, and we don't, so many of us don't know about him. There's also people like Team Hoyt. I don't know if you know Team Hoyt, but when Dick and Judy Hoyt, when their son was born, he was also told he was so severely disabled. Excuse me. He was so severely disabled that they told him, you got to put him away, put him in an institution. No one will care about this kid. He's going to amount to nothing. He'll never understand you. And his parents wouldn't give up on him, and they took him everywhere. They would drag him in the wheelchair. They would take him swimming. They would do whatever they did. And there was a charity race for a boy who had been paralyzed. And the young son, Rick, said, you know what, we should run in that race, Dad, just to show that kid that you shouldn't give up, that anything's still possible. And so the dad takes his son and pushes him in the wheelchair and runs in the race. And when he runs in the race, he needs a computer to speak. It took him until he was in his teens before he spoke his first sentence. And it said, when he typed out on a computer using his eyes to type. And he finally said, "Go Bruins" was his first sentence. At least he didn't say he was a Yankee fan. And basically, he runs in the race, and he finishes in the race, and he says, "Dad, when I'm with you, it feels like my disability disappears." And the dad continues to run in marathons. He pushes his son. He runs an Ironman. He swims. He ties a rope around his chest and swims with his boy behind him, tugging him the entire way. And to this day, the younger son can't walk, but with his father, these two men fly. I love that story. They still run races. They sent me a card that said, "Thanks for putting me in your book." And I was like, are you kidding me? That was the easy part. And I just love that people like that are still here. And I think we just, it's so easy to focus on the bad. And I'm not saying we should all say everything's roses and everything's wonderful, but don't forget how much good there is out there. Don't forget the heroes are there. And most important, and this is why I saved it for last, don't forget to thank them. So with that said, let me say the most important thing I will say today, and that is thank you. Thank you for coming year after year and supporting me. It means more than you will ever, ever know. Thanks very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.